This winter marked my grandson David's first experience with the season, coinciding with an unprecedented cold snap reported by the Weather Service. Concerns for both David and his mother, Yvonne, crept into my mind. I feared that the biting cold might adversely affect Yvonne's health. To ease my worries, I decided to reach out via text, inquiring about their well-being and reminding them to stay warm and avoid catching a chill. Despite my best intentions, I received no reply, not even a delivery notification. Yvonne had always been responsible, so her lack of response heightened my concern. After waiting for an hour with no word, I attempted to call, but my efforts were in vain. Realizing the gravity of the situation, a sense of urgency surged through me. I quickly put on a heavy sweater and hurried to my son's family apartment. However, when I buzzed the intercom, there was no answer. Fearing the worst, that Yvonne might have fallen ill inside, I convinced the building manager to let me in. The apartment was cloaked in darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of streetlights outside. I felt along the wall for the light switch, but my repeated efforts yielded no light. Frustrated and anxious, I resorted to the flashlight on my smartphone to navigate the dim space. "Yvonne, are you there?" I called out, hoping they might just be out. Just as I considered leaving, I heard a faint cry coming from the bedroom, prompting me to rush toward the sound. When I entered the bedroom, I found Yvonne trembling from the cold, desperately wrapping little David in a sheet for warmth. To my astonishment, I saw that Yvonne's once long, beautiful black hair had been nearly shaved off. Stunned, I asked, "What on earth happened here?" "I'm Mary Smith, a 61-year-old woman who has spent many years as a hairstylist, operating a salon from my home. My husband and I started the business together, but he passed away from cancer when our son Harry was still young. Despite the hardships, I managed to raise Harry alone, though he often skipped school and got into trouble, making me question my parenting choices. One day, Harry surprised me by expressing an interest in becoming a hairstylist. Initially taken aback, I ultimately chose to support his new passion. After finishing cosmetology school, Harry secured an apprenticeship at an established salon, where he met Yvonne. Their relationship flourished, and soon Harry proposed, announcing his desire to marry her. I took an instant liking to Yvonne, with her radiant smile and long black hair. A year after their wedding, Harry expressed a desire to open his own salon. Though he was still a novice, he brimmed with confidence about his styling abilities. I felt a hint of worry for him, understanding from my own experiences the obstacles that newcomers face in the industry. However, I couldn't ignore the sincerity in Harry's eyes as he spoke of his dream. Curious about his finances, I asked him about his savings. Harry shared his bank statement, looking troubled. Despite a steady income, he was living paycheck to paycheck, spending much of what he earned on leisure pursuits, leaving him without enough to start his own business. I considered advising him to think twice about his spending, but instead, I reassured him, saying, "Don't fret about the money. Treat yourself to some enjoyment." Maybe it was my way of compensating for the loneliness of my childhood without a father. I found myself confiding in my late husband's photograph, revealing that I hadn't touched the life insurance money he had left for Harry. With advice from a knowledgeable acquaintance in real estate, we identified an ideal location, an old barber shop that had recently closed due to the owner's retirement. Another acquaintance offered her husband's help for the renovations, and with my son studying architecture and home for the summer, we began the construction. The salon opened surprisingly quickly after receiving health department approval. I was grateful for the support, recognizing that I couldn't have set up the business alone. I handed Harry the bank book containing the remainder of the inheritance, emphasizing that it was meant for his business expenses, with over half the funds still intact. I urged him not to squander it. Harry chuckled in mild annoyance, assuring me he understood, and Yvonne promised with a bright smile to keep an eye on his spending. With Yvonne's support, I felt a sense of relief and decided to manage their business from afar. However, my optimism began to wane as Yvonne provided me with occasional updates. 3 months after the salon's opening, she confided that Harry appeared disinterested, resulting in declining customer satisfaction and a loss of clients. I was perplexed. I couldn't comprehend the swift changes that had occurred. Yvonne explained that Harry, initially confident his skills would draw customers, had neglected the vital role of customer service in salon management. As I realized Harry's fundamental misunderstanding, my concern for their business's future grew. "What's Harry doing now?" I inquired. Yvonne explained that he was feeling defeated over the lack of clients and had taken to drinking. She worried that if he didn't pull himself together, they would continue to lose more customers. Currently, she was managing the few clients they had left, but with a steady decline in reputation, the salon's prospects looked grim. Hearing Yvonne's concerns, I shared her sense of despair. I promised to confront Harry about the situation during my next visit. Thankful for my support, Yvonne offered a deep bow, brushing back her long black hair. In an effort to uplift the atmosphere, I praised Yvonne's beautiful hair, and she proudly shared that she had been growing it out since middle school for the purpose of donating it. She explained that this involves creating wigs from real hair for children who have lost theirs due to congenital conditions, illnesses, or accidents. Yvonne expressed her joy in being able to contribute to such a noble cause. I was deeply moved by her dedication, especially given her youth. As we continued our conversation, Yvonne revealed that 6 months into her marriage with Harry, she became pregnant. Despite her hard work and diligence, she kept working at the salon until the final month of her pregnancy, trying to support the family while Harry's attitude worsened. Feeling a sense of failure as a mother, I decided to check on their salon one day after finishing work early. I found Harry just as he was about to leave for drinks, dismissing the lack of customers as a common occurrence. When I tried to make him see the significance of impending fatherhood, he shrugged and left. Inside the salon, I saw Yvonne sweeping the floor, having only managed to serve one customer that day. Despite her fatigue, she wore a bright smile. Concerned for her health, I firmly reminded her of the importance of proper nutrition, especially for the baby. She teared up and thanked me for my concern. After hearing from Yvonne about the salon's struggles and Harry's irresponsible spending, I began to regret giving him the bank book. The situation felt grim, and I couldn't shake my frustration and disappointment over Harry's lack of responsibility at such a critical time. I found myself wishing I had acted differently, even with everything going on. Yvonne made sure to care for her hair, gently rubbing her belly. She shared her hope to teach her child about the joy of helping others. It occurred to me that I wanted to support her, especially since my son wasn't contributing much. Acknowledging my failures in raising him, I resolved to help Yvonne at their apartment. She expressed concern about my inconvenience, but I reassured her not to worry and encouraged her to focus on the baby. I felt a deep sense of responsibility for not having raised my son properly, which had led to Yvonne's struggles. It felt like a way to make amends for my past mistakes. As summer drew to a close, Yvonne went into labor earlier than anticipated, and she was taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, Harry was nowhere to be found and was unreachable despite my efforts to get in touch. I sent several messages, but there was no response or even a read receipt. I was bewildered about his absence during such a critical time. With Yvonne's parents no longer around, I became her only support. I reassured her throughout the challenging labor, offering encouragement as she bravely endured. After a long and arduous experience, the sound of the baby's cries filled the room, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. "He's here, you did it, Yvonne." Tears filled my eyes. But Harry, who should have been by her side, never appeared. Meanwhile, my grandson David was experiencing his first winter, with the weather report announcing record low temperatures. Concerned for Yvonne and the newborn, I sent a message that night, but there was no reply, heightening my anxiety. After a failed attempt to call, I decided to visit their apartment. Upon my arrival, the place was engulfed in darkness. Considering the possibility they had gone away, I rang the intercom, but there was no answer. Fearing for Yvonne's safety, I asked the building manager to let me in. Inside the apartment, it was pitch dark, and my efforts to turn on the lights were in vain. Using my smartphone's flashlight, I called out for Yvonne in the living room, but there was no response. Just as I was about to leave, a faint cry from a baby reached my ears from the bedroom. Rushing towards the sound, I found Yvonne shivering from the cold, desperately wrapping newborn David in a sheet. To my shock, her once long, beautiful black hair had been roughly chopped off, and her eyes, red and swollen from crying, looked at me in despair. Overcome with emotion, I exclaimed, "This is dreadful. What happened?" I quickly took off my jumper and placed it over Yvonne, reassuring her. I said, "It's all right now. Please share with me everything you can about what happened." Yvonne began to speak slowly, revealing that even after David's arrival, Harry continued his reckless behavior. Their financial situation worsened, leading to unpaid electric bills. Yvonne, pushed to her limits, confronted Harry, hoping he would step up as a father. Unfortunately, her attempts fell on deaf ears. In a fit of anger, Harry seized a pair of hair-cutting scissors and began to chop off Yvonne's hair. Although she initially fought back, Yvonne soon stopped resisting, fearing that further struggle could inadvertently harm David. Harry taunted her, saying, "Now you won't be able to show your face in public." I was left stunned by my son's cruelty. Yvonne apologized, taking the blame upon herself once more, but I quickly reassured her that this was not her fault. I embraced her tightly, tears streaming down my cheeks. This entire ordeal stemmed from my own excessive leniency in raising Harry. I felt a deep sense of shame and anger over my failures and my son's lack of compassion. Taking a deep breath, I decided to call Harry. "Hey, Mom, it's been a while. What's going on?" He answered nonchalantly. I asked how Yvonne and David were doing. There was a brief pause in his voice, and he claimed they were in Hawaii and would return next week. Knowing he was lying, I responded positively, recalling the years I had devoted to caring for him after my husband passed away. My disappointment was profound. Harry's careless spending of his father's inheritance and his treatment of his family shattered my expectations. A week later, Harry called to cheerfully announce his return from Hawaii. Pretending to be the caring son, he mentioned bringing souvenirs, but I was no longer fooled by his charade. I informed the building manager of my intention to bring Yvonne and David back to my home. I reached out to several places for help. An hour later, Harry called, saying he had just arrived at the airport. Despite his cheerful demeanor, I felt uneasy. When a taxi pulled up in front of the apartment, Harry, displaying tan lines from his sunglasses, struggled to unlock the door. His frustration became evident as he exclaimed, "What's going on here?" I approached him quietly, wearing a smile that masked the anger boiling inside me. "Did you have a good time in Hawaii?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Harry's relief faded upon seeing me, misreading the situation. "Mom, you're here," he exclaimed, his voice filled with surprise, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Listen, I just got back and tried to get into the house, but the key won't fit. Yvonne must be pranking me for going away alone," he claimed, attempting to portray himself as the victim and shift blame onto Yvonne. "What were you doing? I told you I was in Hawaii with my family," he continued, caught in his own lies. I pointed out the inconsistencies, leaving him speechless. "You really had the audacity to lie about a family trip to Hawaii," I said, my disappointment evident. Yvonne had been left behind, shivering with David while Harry indulged in his whims. "To think she cherished her long hair, and you just cut it off without a second thought. Don't you feel any guilt at all?" I questioned, my voice heavy with emotion. Yet Harry showed no remorse, fixating only on his desire to enter the apartment. Then, I dropped the bombshell. I had cancelled the lease on the apartment. Harry protested, but the reality was he had no right to complain. I suggested we go to a nearby coffee shop for a more in-depth conversation. As we sat in silence, his pale face revealed his inner turmoil. Eventually, he confessed to his selfish behavior, acknowledging his reckless spending and empty promises. I shattered his illusions by telling him I had already sold the salon and all its equipment, leaving him with nothing. His protests fell on deaf ears as I calmly left the coffee shop, allowing him to confront the consequences of his actions alone. In the following month, Harry's life took a further nosedive. His cries for help were met with indifference, and he faced legal trouble due to his reckless actions. Meanwhile, Yvonne and David found comfort in our salon. Yvonne, regaining her strength, filed for divorce and devoted herself to her work. With David's joyful presence, the salon thrived, drawing in more customers enchanted by Yvonne's warmth. Though the pain inflicted by Harry's actions lingers, we find solace in the happiness that now fills our salon. In a quiet corner, David sleeps peacefully, his innocence reminding us of the brighter future that awaits. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, and stay amazed.